Shri Narayan Jain ji, Shri Shishir Bajoria ji, Srimati Lekha Sharma ji, Shri Ashok Purohit ji. Friends, it's really for me a very great pleasure to be with all of you, and मुझे पता नहीं आप में से किसी ने कभी किताब लिखी है या नहीं, but the greatest satisfaction that you can get is actually from your own book. And to see your book actually reincarnated in another language is something which touches you very, very deeply. And for me today, to have this book in Bangla is really a great honor. I have no words to tell you how deeply I feel about it, and I would really thank my friend who has made this possible. Now, I will come at some stage to some of the questions that or issues, googlies, दूसरास, underhand bowling, जो भी इनका था शिशिर जी का. But before I do that, मैं आप लोगों को दो चीज़ कहना चाहता हूँ, because in a way that is a context for the book also and also for my talk today. One, I really believe today that foreign policy is not something limited to Delhi and not something limited to the government. आप सबका हक भी बनता है, आप सबका हित भी है इसमें. And so one of the issues which I have addressed in my book, and I actually मेरा तरीका ये था, I started with my earlier book. I would like write a chapter. Normally it was like often like a speech. Then I would go to some audience, somebody like all of you, and then I would have a session. And then I would, in that session, note down points which आपका reaction, किसी का criticism, some angle I did not see, some idea that they gave me. And that would then go back into whatever I had presented. So in a way, I can say it is a conversation with the public, which has been actually the basis of the book. And this point which I make, that foreign policy for you, that all of us today, our lives, our existence sometimes is impacted by foreign policy. And the most clear example of it actually was COVID. कि आप सोचिए 2019 दिसंबर 2020 जनवरी, आप लोगों ने कोविड का नाम ही नहीं सुना था, मैंने भी नहीं सुना था. जब पहले खबर आई, you would have said, okay, something is happening in some city of China, तो मेरा क्या लेना देना इससे. I mean, we all had that feeling. Then people felt, okay, it is spreading, so let us find a way of stopping it. तो चलिए एयरपोर्ट में कुछ प्रतिबंध लगाइए, stop travel, ये करिए वो करिए. But the reality was, it was not possible to stop it. It was not possible to contain it. And then we had to manage it. Actually, you saw foreign policy come into action that suddenly, because there was Modi ji created a small group of ministers and said, you people have to be meeting every day to handle it. So one part of it was, उस समय देश में मास्क नहीं थे. Entire country, I think there were 2 factories which made ventilators. वो भी they used to import some components of it. PPE production was virtually absent. I mean, even masks we were importing, rubber gloves we were importing. कहाँ से हमने शुरू किया? And then actually you realized actually how important relationships became in the world. The initial supplies that came, because it was like, to be frank, it was like a global black market at that time. That same PPE, the same ventilator, now people said, no, You have to give order, it's now 5 times the cost. When you confirmed order, they said, "Nahi, wo badal gaya, now it is 10 times the cost." So people held you to ransom. People created all sorts of issues. You needed the connections, the relationships, the influence to do this. Now, it happened in the case of vaccine also, that there are roughly about, for any vaccine, there are about 40, 50 different suppliers whose different supplies finally go into the making of that vaccine, spread in different countries. And many of them, particularly in US at that time, उनके यहाँ नियम था, कानून था, that you cannot supply to another country till your own requirements are fully met. So effectively we were looking at an export ban. Now we had to go and negotiate with the Americans saying, please make an exception for us. And I will tell you why, and that is also relevant, which they did. Or later on, आप लोगों को याद होगा जब वो Delta variant आया, and you know the oxygen shortage that we had. Now, how many countries actually helped us? Some gave us oxygen production units. Many of them actually sent us medical oxygen. Now, they came in many cases because our relationships with them were good. So, no, there are many other aspects. You know, Vande Bharat में लोग बाहर थे, उनको हम कैसे लाए, जो लोग आ नहीं पाए, requests were made to countries saying, please keep them, please look after them, please don't dismiss employees. If I have students, please find them shelter or dormant. So, COVID is just one experience. Now, there are many other experiences I put out there, that जो लोग Ukraine में फंस गए थे. If people came out of Ukraine safe and sound, except one person unfortunately who passed away, they came out because ultimately foreign policy delivered. In the most critical moment of Ukraine, the last lot of evacuation, had Prime Minister Modi not spoken to President Putin and President Zelensky, we would not have been able to stop the fighting and create the pathway for people to come out. So, now, anybody who today, हमें पता नहीं, next time we travel, any of us who travels, but as I said, COVID में people who never traveled, जो अपने घर में थे, I mean, they did not escape COVID. COVID came to their house. So I tell people, ये नहीं सोचिए कि foreign policy is foreign. ये globalized दुनिया है. It impacts everybody. It comes to the country. It can come to your home. And it will affect in different ways. You know, अब बहुत लोगों के हाथ में phone है. Think about something as simple as the phone. Today, if many of these phones are made in India, उसका भी कारण है, foreign policy कारण है. If you have today the certain technologies, जो आपका 5G है वगैरह, somewhere all, any technology, anything today in our life, तेल की, पेट्रोल की कीमत, I mean, everybody says, okay, great, you stood up to world pressure and bought oil from Russia. पर वो foreign policy है. आप पेट्रोल पंप गए ना, टैंक भरा ना, what would have happened if that foreign policy did not work? How much more money would you have paid to fill that tank? And what would have been the inflation in the economy? If, other than your gadi, your sabji would have been costlier because it would have had an inflationary impact on the entire economy. So I am very happy today that we have, you know, this interest today in foreign policy. And मैं आप लोगों के साथ ये definitely मैं अपना अनुभव share करना चाहूँगा that this time around I have traveled length and breadth of the country. I have been to many states. I have been to big cities, small cities, sometimes even small towns. I see today an interest in foreign policy, which I feel is very good for the country. Because that means our minds are getting globalized. हम लोग पहचानते हैं what are the opportunities, what are the challenges. We are connected to the world, and that is a very important part of preparing mentally for our movement towards Viksit Bharat. So that actually is the first point to make. The second point, और वो शिशिर जी ने मुझे थोड़ा सा छेड़ा इस पे, जो I have in each case used one epic. पहली किताब में महाभारत था, दूसरे में रामायण था. And even Ramayana actually was an interesting story. मेरी पहली किताब जो थी, and I still am waiting now that our friend has done the translation of the second book. I requested him saying, please help me with the first book also. I couldn't find somebody who would attend to it then. I was actually talking about my first book somewhere, and somebody stood up. Actually, it was an author. It was an author who has written both on Mahabharata and Ramayana for popular audience. And she asked me saying, you have referred to Mahabharata. अब जो लोग कूटनीति राजनीति करते हैं, महाभारत is a more natural story. माने उसका युग भी अलग है, लोगों का व्यवहार भी कुछ और है. It is a very different era with very different standards and ethics. So she said, have you ever thought about Ramayana from your perspective as a foreign minister or as someone in diplomacy? I will not say मैंने सोचा नहीं था, but to be honest, मैंने उतना नहीं सोचा that I could actually relate it to a kind of a book. Once she put that idea in my mind, I started rereading, thinking, debating, and that is what I have done in this book. That I have taken I've taken different situations. What is the state of the world? And I in fact will give you some examples. I had kept it for the end of the talk, but I will bring it up front. Today we say हमें विश्व बंधु बनना चाहिए. Effectively, what does it mean? It means, have maximum friends. Most important, have a good reputation. अब जो युवा पीढ़ी के हैं, they will say आपकी branding अच्छी होनी चाहिए. Now, think about it. In our entire imagination, in our culture, what do we associate really with, goodness, with sort of, as I say, the highest kind of reputation? That is Prabhu Shri Ram. Now, we say, okay, diplomacy mein we should do globally good things. I was speaking about COVID. I said, लोगों ने हमें oxygen दी. America gave us the ingredients for the vaccine. Why? Because we also did something. We also gave hydroxychloroquine to the Americans when they wanted. We gave paracetamol to them when they wanted. To Gulf countries, lot of Gulf countries gave us big amounts of liquid medical oxygen. But we, through the lockdown, हमने उनका food supply कभी नहीं काटा. And at that time, आप पता नहीं कितने लोग गल्फ से परिचित हैं. They import their daily food, actually in many ways, food supplies literally goes in flights out of India. So, ये जो global good जो करना है, actually this is what Ram and Lakshman were doing. I mean, initially when Vishwamitra goes to their father, Dasharath, and says, please give me your son so that I can, these rishis in Sharabhanga of forest, unki jo tapasya jo hai, the Rakshasas are interrupting it. So in a way, Ram, Lakshman, what do? They are actually doing something for the world. Exactly today you can say that same sentiment. There are 20 ships of the Indian Navy which are in the Arabian Sea today, dealing with these drone attacks and missile attacks and keeping the global shipping going. Or the point I make, that every Ram needs a Lakshman. Every Ram needs a Lakshman, because koi to hona chahiye sathi, somebody who's with you at good times, bad times, grief, jo when you get angry, thanda karte hain, when you give up, aapko protsahit karte hain, who actually, if you look, it's very interesting. I mean, Lakshman generally is supposed to be more hot-tempered. But actually at key moments, he is actually the person who's counseling him, And, for example, when the ocean, when Varuna does not allow the bridge to be built, so Prabhu Shri Ram fires one arrow, and then Lakshman tells him, okay, don't fire the second one, the consequences would be too serious. And the bridge is allowed to be built. So every Ram needs a Lakshman, every country. We may be a big country. We are a big country. But we also need friends and allies. We need people who will stand by us. One part of diplomacy is how do you have countries, through good and bad, who will actually honestly tell you that this is our view, this is what, in my belief, is in your interest. Or this example which Shishirji raised, that Hanumanji, in a way, as a super diplomat, because उनको जो काम जो दिया गया था, it was to go to Ravan's court and to on behalf of Prabhu Shri Ram to convey what he had to do. But देखिए उन्होंने किया क्या? He went there, but he went there in a certain way after making a psychological impact on them. He had sort of destroyed many things so that they understood that this is not a normal happening. Then out there, he is able to assess everything in the court. Eventually, when Vibhishan leaves Lanka and joins Prabhu Shri Ram, there is actually a suspicion कि भाई उनका भाई है, should you really take him or not take him? And it is Hanumanji's instinct from that experience of going to Ravan's court in Lanka that actually Vibhishan is in heart and soul with us, that he is a good man. Or then the whole idea that Lanka ko jalana, actually getting the manner in which he gets access to Ma Sita, the way in which he keeps her morale up. So if you look at it, this in a diplomatic world is a person, mane kaam diya, you gave him 5 things to do, he actually comes back and does 10. And the perseverance and the commitment that he shows. For when we actually in diplomacy talk about who are model diplomats, because our education has been very shaped by the Western world. जो उदाहरण जो देते हैं लोग, they are mostly Western kind of models which we are given. It can be modern, तो कोई कहेगा Metternich, Machiavelli, or something more modern. Yeah, people will go back actually to something Greek, and from their epics they would use. But we actually have our own example. And in the case of Sri Krishna, actually he is also a great strategist in a way, that it is his strategizing how to set narrative, how does the moral, the ethics favor the Pandavas. So the idea that from Ramayana, the diplomatic lessons which are there, or even today, I would say the idea of competition, that you have, today we all read that between US and China, there is a very intense competition. Okay, there is a sense that China, believes that in many ways its ambitions are conflicting or competing, depending on how you define it. If you look at the Ramayana and I would say the competitive sense between Vishwamitra and Vasishtha, it is very similar. And for Vishwamitra, until Vasishtha accepts that he is a Rajarishi, he will not be content. He wants certification from him. So there are, even the idea, if you look at it as a power, the rise of a power. Today people say India is rising. But rise is not, doesn't happen by itself. Uske, you have चुनौतियां होती हैं. You are tested, you are pressurized, there are challenges. Now this actually is what happens to Sri Ram. That beginning with, I would say, like going to the forest, dealing with the Rakshas, bending Shiva's bow, dealing with Parshuram. So at different stages, different tests come. And that is how finally, in a way, he gets his full potential. Iski ek self-discovery hoti hai, saying that this is really what you are capable of. Or I would, one example, one comparison. Actually, I think if my memory serves me right, I once saw it in Amit Shahji's one of his speeches. This is to Jatayu. And the comparison I make in the book is actually to Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. That someone who is wise, someone who's willing to give everything to warn a nation of what is to come. So, why I give you these examples is once you start looking at our own tradition, at our own literature, at our own beliefs, our own faith, there are things out there which actually help us, which guide us towards a better understanding of the world. I have nothing against the world. In fact, I have very many things for the world. My whole life has been built around dealing with the world. But I do believe that we should deal with the world through the strength of our own history and our culture and our traditions. There are, for us, progress, when we speak about, rise of India, Viksit Bharat, it cannot and it should not be an imitation of the West. There are things from the West which we can profit by, which we can gain, which sometimes we can absorb. But we have to find our own way. And one of the reasons why I moved from India way to why Bharat Matters, that in these 4 years, 5 years gap, thoda India way I had written it 1 year before. In these 5 years, I have actually seen in our own country, in the government, in our politics, but I would say as a national mood, that sense of Bharat, that belief in that, we are not, I would say, apologetic or defensive about our own past and our own traditions. So that's, as I say, if we are to go forward, we have to know where we came from if we have to really know where we are going. And where we came from rests on acceptance and appreciation of our own past, of our own traditions and of our own heritage. And that is why, from just a much more, I would say, detached analysis of the world, which was the first book. The first book was more, I would say, calculation and analysis. Second book was more belief and commitment. So that is why India Way became why Bharat Matters. Now, you can ask me, okay, so now come to the book, why does Bharat matter? And why Bharat matters, I just give a few propositions, and then, as I say, I frankly much more enjoy interacting with people, and I would like to do that. Look, the world is a tough place. It's always been so. It has become more so. You can see it today. There's a war going on in Ukraine, there's fighting going on in Gaza, Israel, there is this Iran-Israel problem, Red Sea, Arabian Sea, I was telling you about, South China Sea में कुछ और problems हैं, on our own border and a line of actual control with China. There is today our troops are there deployed to counter pressure from China. There is the constant issue of terrorism. COVID ke baad, many economies are in very bad situation. There are big governance challenges in different parts of the world. So if you look at the totality of it, things are very tough. Now, how is it different? There was a time before when one country or two countries or one group of countries would say, don't worry, we are in charge of the world, we will deal with it. They may have dealt with it properly or badly, but they at least said we will try and deal with it. Today, that is also not that. That if you look, actually, in many ways, all these things are going on. अगर कोई locally solution ढूंढ लेता तो ढूंढ लेता, अगर नहीं ढूंढता तो things carry on. So there is a certain, I would say, almost acceptance or indifference to many of these things which are going on. And the fact that no country today is dominant enough or no bloc is dominant enough to impose its will has created a completely new reality. Now in this reality, why Bharat Matters is because people know that this is actually a transition period, that the old order has run out of gas, petrol. New order has not come. This is when, there is movement from one to the other. So in this, the world is watching India. They are looking to see, okay, if something new is going to happen, who will be the newer players? Now, number of countries in the world are more or less fixed, roughly about 200. Within that, you can say G20 is a very good example. Okay, these are the 20 biggest by economy. Within the G20, there would be some. You will say, okay, these are bigger, more powerful, growing faster. They have something more technology. You can use different metrics. So if you take this kind of thinking today in the world, definitely today a lot of the attention is on us. So why is it on us? I just give you 4 or 5 examples. After COVID, most of the world today is actually struggling with economic growth. So you have slowed down pretty much across the world. And jab growth rate kehte hain, really growth has really fallen. In fact, in many cases, in some countries, some regions, it has not even come back to the pre-COVID levels. Now, in this, the world sees today a country, a large economy, growing at 7%, maintaining its fiscal discipline, keeping inflation low, visibly improving its governance. So they look actually at what is happening within the country, within the totality, the growth, governance, the total package, which is actually our external image. To some extent, they are also influenced by the COVID period. Because COVID period was in a way like a stress test on the world. So everybody, पता नहीं medical checkup आप लोग कराते हैं या नहीं, we are all put on a treadmill and then they check how did you handle the treadmill. Now think of the COVID, entire world was put on a treadmill. Now who fared how well? Now the feeling is today, these Indians, we thought they were actually going to be the biggest problem. They actually handled their own situation. They even helped with other people. So the recovery after COVID, the handling of the COVID, I think that is a second factor. The third is actually the way in which we conducted the G20. That when we got the G20 presidency, to be very frank with you, many countries felt sorry for us. उनके मन में था पता नहीं ये लोग कहाँ फंस गए हैं. They are really going to have a problem. They did not expect that we will actually be able to, in this, there were countries who were literally not talking to each other. कि एक मिनिस्टर आता था, the other person would leave the room. I mean, you will be amazed. You will think these are high-end diplomats, minister level ke log. This is not what is maybe your imagination of how it, but this was the reality. Now, to get in this situation, these 20 countries to agree on crucial issues, that I think people felt okay. That means actually these Indians, and here a lot of it personally revolved around the Prime Minister, that he has this ability today to get countries to work around, to accept. I would say to some extent, the stand we took on the Russia oil issue also helped. At one level, people said, okay, this is a country, they're clear about their interest, they will take a stand for their interest. But I also had many other countries who told me very honestly, we also felt the same, but we were not in a position to say it. We were not in a position to take the stand. But actually our interest and our sentiment was very much the same as yours. Then I would say another factor which has made the world actually think about us a little bit differently is the manner in which we have responded to the challenge on the line of actual control with China. Because many other countries today in Asia are facing challenges of some kind on their border or in the seas. But the fact, when the Chinese came in large numbers, this happened in May of 2020. I don't know आप लोग अभी आप याद रखते हैं नहीं. Remember, it was lockdown period. Lockdown period में you could not have left your home to go to the end of the street. And in that lockdown, when everything was shut, even now people don't fully appreciate. Prime Minister Modi ordered tens of thousands of troops with weapons to go to that border, which we managed actually during that lockdown period. The kind of railway, air, road mobilization which took place. Someday somebody will write about it. But actually if you looked at the number of troops we sent there, actually we sent probably more troops there than we even sent during the border conflict. So people see today that this is, an India which is willing to stand up and defend its borders. They also see on an issue like terrorism. Because when terrorism happens, everybody says, yes, it's very bad, very bad. Then they say, but don't do anything. Don't do anything because they're not getting hurt, you are getting hurt. So when somebody else is getting hurt, you give very good advice. When you are hurt, it's different. Now, they see what is the change. That India, they may not entirely like it, but they respect it. That India which did not do anything even after something as big as 26/11 happened in Mumbai. But that India responded with Uri, that India responded on Pulwama. That India today has sent a very clear signal to the neighbor saying, look, don't think by doing something bad here and going back, that will protect you. Now, all said and done, the world respects strength. The world respects that ability to actually enforce what is a point of view in a way in which there is a cost to someone who's done something bad. So I give you all these, and again, one example, because in our country, I know a lot of people even today talk about it. In fact, when I travel, I've had this experience in one, really quite remote district of Orissa. One I had in Pune, I think, where people who come out of Ukraine actually come to thank you, or their families come to thank you. So hamare yahan that whole issue is still very much in the consciousness of the public. But what you have to understand is, actually the rest of the world was also watching us. I had foreign minister of one country who complained to me very, very bitter, saying it was so difficult, I don't, so I also said, yes, there were a lot of problems. Then he finally told me, my first flight was very difficult, second theek tha. So his total experience was 2 flights, we did 90. And the world sees that, because remember at that time even developed countries, Western countries, told many of their citizens stuck in Ukraine, ki bhai, there's nothing I can do. You now find your way out. I warned you saying please come out, you didn't come out, now you are on your own. So when people see this kind of, we go into Sudan, we bring back our people, we go, Ukraine was one, before Nepal, Yemen, there are a number of these. So this idea that India protects its people, India is there for its people. Let me tell you, that also really gives a certain reputation for India today in the world. So when I say today that India, why Bharat matters? Bharat matters because in the perception of the world, something has changed. Today it is more confident, they make their own judgment, they are willing to back up their judgment with action, they look after their people, they will stand up to pressure, but yet they are friendly people, they are firm when firmness is required. But they work with other people, they do global good. We may send, for our students we may send the Air Force, but for global good we have sent the Navy to the Arabian Sea. So as I told you, after all, Prabhu Shri Ram's message is that you have to not only do things for yourself, you have to do things really for the collective as well. And that kind of image today, if there is a single action today in many parts of the world, which has really created a feeling for India, really genuine feeling on the street. I'm not talking diplomats or officials. Actually, it is our vaccine. There are countries in the world, many of them very small countries. Unka number kabhi nahi aata vaccine ke liye. And they were actually, many of them were having this situation. They had a neighbor who was big and rich, who had bought enough vaccines to vaccinate population 5 times, 6 times, 7 times the population. But they were not willing to give 100,000 doses to somebody small and somebody less developed who was nearby. And many of these countries today, I've had personally this experience that people stop you on the street. Those of you who social media dekhte hain, aapka interest hai. I recommend to you, there is a very nice a speech by the Foreign Minister of Jamaica. It's a lady. And she actually says that, look, she gestures with her hand. She said, look, I now have India inside me. So when I say that, being good, being smart, advancing our interests, they are all together. And these are today actually the lessons from our own history, from our own epics, that it doesn't, you don't have to be even necessarily a deeply religious person to learn from this. That it is actually ethical. It is often also, for someone like me, there is a strategy and a diplomacy and a learning which comes from it. Now, I gave you all these examples, but at the end of the day today, eventually any country is known by the progress that they make at home. I may or may not be good at diplomacy, but my diplomacy cannot succeed if things at home are not working well. Because finally, that is my strength. So what has happened in the last 10 years? If you actually see the progress in India, you see the infrastructure changes in India, you see the growth rate in India, you see, the airports coming up, the roads getting better. You actually see this whole effort we have made today at dealing with poverty. You know, in the last 10 years, 250 million people, 25 crore log jo hain, they have come out of poverty. 250 million people. In our history, in 10 years, that is the biggest which has ever happened. And it is not a one-time issue. We have actually created a system today where, because a country cannot progress if the leading, the richer segment progresses and people get left behind. So how do you today carry the entirety of society, that no one is actually left behind? Because that is when people start respecting you. Because one of our problems was, there was this deep image. Oh, India is country of poor people. Agar such kahe, actually poverty was like a branding for us in the world. But today, that very challenge, people actually look at it and say, oh, this country today can actually give rations, free rations, regularly, continuously to 80 crore people. That they can actually give health access to 35, 40 crore people. That they can give homes to 20 crore people. So when they actually look at what has today changed, and these very basic, I would say, provisions that we have done, this has impressed people. But what has impressed the world more is the manner in which we have done it. You know, we always had this reputation, not always, be 20, 25 years, कि हम back office. We are back office of the world because हमारे यहाँ IT है. During COVID, people started saying, चलिए ये pharma of the world भी हैं, ये pharmacy हैं, दुनिया की दवाई बनाते. But today, actually, people look at what we are doing digitally. That all this, I tell you, ration देना, घर देना, पानी की connection देना, gas cylinder देना, passport देना. I mean, those of you who have passports, ever applied for a passport, याद करिए how it was 10-15 years ago. कितना time लगता था आपको? हाँ? अरे वो मैं कह नहीं सकता ना. So, नहीं, अब है. Now, see, this, when I say that it is scaled up, actually, ये digital जो है, इसमें एक ईमानदारी का भी लाभ है. That when, अगर आज today आप लोग passport के लिए किसी का application होगा ना, you can actually see not only passport, other things also. You will get a tracker कि आपका इस दिन हुआ था, यहाँ से फाइल वहाँ गया, वहाँ से ये गया, पुलिस वेरिफिकेशन के लिए है. तो लोग जो हैं, people used to wait months, sometimes years, and नहीं मिला तो they would just accept, नहीं मिला तो नहीं मिला. Today, 15 दिन नहीं मिलते तो I start getting, tweets and emails and so on, which is good. I like it. And this is happening. I mean, in a way, I can say it is not only, people look at it sometimes as benefits. ये लोगों का हक है, अधिकार है. And once they start getting it, the impact of it on the total collective, this people see today. They are seeing today changes in this country, in education, in skill, in infrastructure, in mindset. And they are asking themselves that if today the world is moving in this more technology-centric area, what is the relevance of India here? So Bharat for them matters because this 7% growing Bharat with all these changes, with 250 million people coming out of poverty, Bharat is a bigger market, Bharat is a bigger production center, Bharat is a bigger talent pool, Bharat is a place today for design, for innovation. You can see today if more FDI investment is coming in. Kuch to karan hai. It shows their assessment. More countries today want to do free trade agreements with us. Why is it? Because they feel today that these are things that they really need to do with us. In fact, if you look company ke level mein, there is this. You look at the number of joint ventures. The fact how many more in today Indian companies are getting involved in global supply chains. So we have changed. this 10 years has actually created a different impression. But as I said, the world has also changed. The world today has other problems. One problem is that उनको लगा पिछले 20 साल 25 साल में there is a kind of over concentration कि उनकी निर्भरता जो है चाइना पे ज़्यादा हो गई है. और ये कोविड के समय में सबको लगा कि कहीं ना कहीं चाइना में कुछ प्रॉब्लम हो जाए तो पूरे दुनिया को इसका प्रभाव दिखाई देता है. तो आज जो है दुनिया में एक बहुत बड़ी चर्चा हो रही है, हाउ टू डी रिस्क द इंटरनेशनल इकोनॉमी, हाउ डू यू हैव many सेंटर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन, हाउ डू यू हैव मोर सप्लाई चेंज. अगर डेटा का विषय है तो लोगों को लगता है कि डेटा जो है ऐसी जगह होनी चाहिए विच इज सिक्योर, जहाँ जो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट है, रूल ऑफ लॉ है, वो सो इसमें पीपल इमीडिएटली स्टार्ट थिंकिंग ऑफ इंडिया. सो इट कैन बी फॉर इकोनॉमिक रीजंस, it can be because, as I said, our economic growth has interested the world. It can even be for connectivity, that today अगर लॉजिस्टिक्स बनाना है तो लोग चाहते हैं कि भारत इसमें शामिल हो, तो मिडल ईस्ट के साथ एक कनेक्टिविटी कॉरिडोर है, एक पूर्व की तरफ वियतनाम की तरफ एक ट्राइलैटरल हाईवे है. एंड देन एज आई फाइनली सेड, ये अब दुनिया में एक हमारे बारे में इम्प्रेशन बन गया है that India, भारत has this ability कि हम रूस के साथ भी काम कर सकते हैं, ईरान के साथ भी काम कर सकते हैं, अमेरिका के साथ भी चल सकते हैं, इजराइल को भी साथ रख सकते हैं. दिस एबिलिटी जो हमें G20 में दिखाई दिया, दिस हैज ऑल्सो टुडे दिस एक्सेप्टेबिलिटी दैट हम अलग अलग, I mean, I tell people this सबका साथ सबका विकास, ये डिप्लोमेसी में भी चलता है. That how do you actually carry everybody with you? So these were some of the thoughts. Today definitely I would say कि from a global perspective there is much more interest today in India. There is much more respect for India. More countries want to work. ये नहीं है कि हमारी चुनौतियां नहीं हैं, कुछ उत्तर में है, कुछ पश्चिम में है, सबको पता है. कुछ ऐसी चुनौतियां हैं जो विच आर नॉट कंट्री स्पेसिफिक, अब क्लाइमेट चेंज जैसा है या कुछ टेक्नोलॉजी की होगी. बट ओवरऑल टुडे वी आर, जब हम लोग विकसित भारत की बात करते हैं, आज जो है द 10 years जो पिछले 10 साल का रिकॉर्ड जो है, वो एक फाउंडेशन है, एक बुनियाद है, आधार है, जिसपे हम आगे 25 साल जो विकसित भारत की यात्रा जो है, वी कैन एम्बार्क ऑन दैट विद अ ग्रेट डील ऑफ कॉन्फिडेंस. एंड मैं अपने अनुभव से कह सकता हूँ दैट टुडे रियली भारत matters more and more, and as we proceed down this path, I think it will continue. Thank you very much.
Cover more and more. One request to everyone. Question would be really appreciated rather than a speech. So let's start.
Yeah, I'm a surgeon. I wanted to ask Dr. Purnendu Roy. I studied in Jipma in southern India. What I'm wanting to know, that we understand that education is the most important thing along with the growth of any country if it is not matched. And there was a time when we heard that the Ivy League universities like Harvard and others were planning to come tie up in Gujarat. When we see today, top 100 universities in the world, we still don't have a single Indian institute in the top 100 in the world. Is there any plan that since we have, so we have millions of people are abroad now, so we have the brain and they want to go to the Ivy League, are we likely to get this into foreign policy that Stanford, Harvard, Yale, they are all or will be coming? Thank you.
The next question.
Sir, I think this was an enriching and informative session to all of us. Now, why Bharat Matters? I think, although I'm not into means everything, but I know few of the reasons, like abrogation of Article 370. That was one of the reasons. And moreover, you know, how India answered Trudeau, the Canadian relationship with India. That I do not know whether you covered, or but these two are important. But at the same time, what I find is lot of migration is taking place, especially the young generation. Now, I do not know, and I know this very well, because sometimes I was also looking into this. So how do you address this? How can you convince the young generation to be in India?
Madam, your introduction.
I'm Dr. Pratusha Das. I'm the Dean of St. Xavier's University.
Okay. At the back.
Recently, we have seen that US and Canada have both accused us of murders in their countries and accused us of supposed murders. Also, we have seen questions like religious freedom being raised. Now, are these purely concerns regarding their vote bank? Are they addressing their vote bank? Or is there an attempt to influence Indian voting, to influence India? Would they want a more pliant Indian government?
Okay, we will have a Mantriji answer, but before that, sir, you on the front row, thanks. I'm sorry, but I didn't announce this earlier. You just have to contribute 2,000 rupees for the phone ringing. And anybody else?
Let me पहले मुझे इनका उत्तर देने दीजिए, then I'll come turn by turn. So the first question, the point you made about education. Yes, definitely today I think there is a lot of focus on education, and education reform, education expansion, education deepening is a very big priority. Many reasons for it. It's not a question of Ivy Leagues coming here, because at the end of the day, you know, a country like us, we should not be pegging our aspirations and standards on any league of any other country. We have to develop our own mere quality, you can say, or motivating institutions. What has happened in this country is, if you look at the growth of population, if you look at the growth of the economy, in many areas, the capacities did not keep up with it. You are a doctor. Please look at your own field. You know, no, I'm not blaming you, I'm just making a remark. Look, did our hospitals keep up with that demand? No. So, did our infrastructure keep up with the demand? No. So, we today actually have a big task in front of us in different domains. So, if we are today rapidly building our roads, rapidly building our railways, you know, airports, whatever, why are we doing it? Because somewhere we didn't move fast enough for whatever reason, government of the day, constraint of the day, resources nahi the, policy kharab tha. So definitely education today is ripe for that kind of big push. That one is a huge catch-up, that's one. The second is actually change the very nature of education, which is we have people who come out of educational institutions who are actually not employable. You know, I've experienced it myself. It won't be in the medical field, but it would be in many other areas. You know, I spent in my transition from civil servant to politics, I also had a year with business. And I saw at that time the kind of challenges today that business faces in actually getting ready to employ potential from the market. It's a huge problem, which means actually we have to focus much more on skills and employability rather than degree kind of education, which is very hard because, you know, our culture, see, we are all brought up to believe I mean, all of us, myself included, saying, our parents would have told us, "Nahi, go get a degree first, how can you compromise on that?" So we have to challenge some things we have been with. There have to be those changes. What we have done is we have started this process of getting foreign universities to open collaborative campuses or, double degree type collaborations. It will be, we'll have to create a model which is sui generis, which is which will be specific to India. There is no, we will not grow by opening our doors to foreign universities en masse, because they will educate a very narrow section at very high fees and will make us into a revenue generating operation. We don't want that, The idea is not to regulate necessarily the cost of education. There somewhere, there will be a range, a differentiated range out there. So this is the new education policy. Actually provides for many of these. I think it kind of has come as we were moving for election, so a lot of the consequences of it on the ground have not happened. But your basic point that we need to reform education, because look, I give you, there's the economics of it. Today, roughly about more than 1 million Indian students go out. That's a challenge, And it's a challenge not just financially. Many of them go to places, I can tell you, where the quality of education is not good. And including in the medical field. I sometimes get concerned about actually what kind of education people are getting. So these are real challenges. We have to face up to them. We have to expand our capacities, and definitely in education, I think that is the backbone of the chain that we are looking at. The second issue, which is related to that, the migration issue. Look, why do people migrate? At the end of the day, people migrate because of a job opportunity. That is because if people get the same opportunity, it's human nature. Nobody wants to leave home. You leave because you expect something better and different and additional far away. This can happen for the whole country abroad. It can also happen within the country, that within some states, we see people actually going to other parts of the country in search of jobs. There's a lot of internal migration as well. That's also. So what does one do for it? The answer is really to create the incentives. People are not going to not go abroad because you tell them, no, it's very unpatriotic, please don't go abroad. They will not go abroad if they feel that the opportunities are just as good, or there is something here which will match that. So we collectively have to actually create those opportunities. So when we say Viksit Bharat, when we say growth rate badhna chahiye, we need to progress. That's another 2,000 for you. These are really some of the steps that we need to do, and we cannot really create employment in this country if we do not increase manufacturing. We have neglected manufacturing. Services will not give us those numbers out there. There are too many people whose livelihood is focused on the agricultural sector or the informal sector. So this will only happen if manufacturing in this country is very significantly increased, and we support self-employment. Because self-employment can also be a very big employer, which means we must have the financial policies. There is a reason today. Why do we give these Mudra loans and Swanidhi loans? Because they actually support a very, very big segment. If you look at the number of people who have taken Mudra loans, I think there will be almost 500 million users of Mudra applications in the last decade. And that is actually a very, very big push for the economy. There's a big debate today even about employment. That debate doesn't factor in actually the large number of people who today find self-employment a better option than to settle for something which they really don't want to do. On the question of, US, Canada, religious freedom, etc. Do they want to influence us? Answer is yes. They do want to influence us because many of these countries feel that they have influenced the world for the last 70, 80 years in the world order, and Western countries actually feel they influenced the world for the last 200, 300 years. So are they willing to, how do you expect someone who's been in that position to give up those old habits so easily? So there's a natural desire, because that also answers the gentleman at the back. Why are these papers, which you mentioned, why are they negative in India? Because at the end of the day, they are seeing an India which is not, in a sense, compliant or with their image of how India should be. That they want, they want people, or they want ideology, or they want a way of life, or a social, as they say, people like us. They are looking for that class of people really to rule this country. And I think they're disturbed when the Indian population feels otherwise. And that has been today actually a big part of the debate between us and the world. You can say world really means your Western countries and the Western media. I mean, to be very honest with you, actually, please, in many cases, because I follow this for a living, Western media actually in some cases openly endorse candidates and endorse political parties in this country. I mean, they don't hide their preference. So the answer is, and they're very smart, because look, somebody's been doing this world domination game for 300 years, you learn a lot. Anubhavi log hai, chatur log hai. So, they will do see, after all, what does a newspaper do? Oh, they will reputationally damage you. Oh, koi index nikalenge. They will put you down in that index. They will, countries who have to go to court to decide the result of their election are giving you today gyan about how to conduct your election. So this is the mind games today which are actually taking place in the world. And I've been following even this election, the kind of commentary. I mean, in this country, in the hottest summer, still, look at the percentage of people who come to vote. Look, we all have our arguments. We all have our arguments till the day the votes are counted. After that, I mean, let us look at our own record. We all accept what this is, we all have faith in the system. Whatever questions we raise because politics, my people raise those things. You have to, but at the end of it all, in our heart of hearts, we all actually, the greatest strength of our system, proof the system works, is actually if you see the multiple elections, the fact that governments change in this country, that one party hands over to another party, different parties, they may have their debates, finally they all, find a way of working together.
Yes, madam.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for your speech. I have a two-part question. You spoke about a blind imitation of the West. Firstly, what do you define as the West? Which countries do you put in that bracket? And secondly, where do you draw the line between imitation and appreciation, since you spoke about appreciation of all cultures?
Your name, please?
Omika. Omika.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Anjula, a gynecologist. Recently, last week, I heard your speech. You were talking about POK. And in many election rallies, it's been echoed, POK ko lenge. Is it a strategy for this year, the government?
Radhya, I'm in the field of environment. I was just thinking whether I can have a little privilege to asking that what is your thoughts on how to fight the enemies within, especially when we are having a problem of tremendous demographic change in India.
Kaushik Das, a New Delhi-based journalist with a special interest in global geopolitics. I have two specific questions. Recently, the Indian media reported that Pakistan occupied Kashmir wanted to merge with India. What is your take about it? And we have two friends, Russia and US. Now, Russia has accused the US of influencing the Indian election. What is your view? Thank you.
Dr. Jaishankar, it was actually the acknowledgement of the world when we had this, the strength of this country was acknowledged when the G20 presidency brought us huge world's trust, global trust. And on the backdrop of that, one thing which is eluding us for a long time, that is a chair in Security Council. What do you think are the possibilities in your future? That's my question. So I'll do one round. Let me start with the young lady there. You asked me who do I mean by the West. See, we use the West as a broad group, basically like North America and Europe. I mean, even I accept within the West, not all countries or all governments or all views are the same. But I would still say that there is nevertheless a certain cultural, ideological, historical kind of thinking there, which comes from that period of colonial domination, then the post-Second World War, you know, the Western Bloc's position. And if you actually look at you can say the rules of the world, how the world works, lot of the institutions, lot of the practices, you know, who's right, who's wrong, these kinds of things, they tend to dominate the debate. So often what they do is they will be very selective, you know. They will suddenly, you know, come to us and say, you know, you are India, you are a democracy, how can you support another country which is not democratic, taking action against a democracy? Now, I am India, you know, I had a non-democracy to my left and one to my right and one to my north, and I found the West was busy when it suited them. So what happens, see what happens when you control the narrative? You know, you actually are able to create a certain impression in the minds of other people. The reality may be otherwise. I'll give you a very good example from Ramayana. You know, Ravan had created this impression that he was undefeatable. In fact, people said that, you know, his only one weakness was when he had to take the boon, he named all the categories, he didn't name men, humans, and that was why, you know, Lord Rama was born in a human form. But the fact was actually, if you look, Ravan was defeated. Vali defeated Ravan. I mean, when Angad went to meet Ravan, and Ravan was not nice to him, Angad actually reminded him saying, look, my father actually tied you up. So, or there was another king called Kartavirya Arjun of Mahishmati who defeated Ravan. But in narrative, inconvenient facts, no, you kind of know how to get rid of it. You clean it up. And then you create this very useful, neat, simple, deployable viewpoint. And how you condition and influence other people. I got two POK questions, so I'll put them together. Look, today, yes, things are, there is a certain ferment happening in POK. I think you can see it in social media, you can see it on television. The analysis of it is very complex, but definitely I have no doubt in my own mind that someone living in POK is comparing their situation with someone actually living in Jammu and Kashmir and saying that, you know, how is it that people today are actually progressing there. And they know that sense of being under occupation, of being discriminated, or being treated badly. I think clearly that any such comparison would be preying on their minds. And, you know, the gentleman there actually asked me, POK, when would it merge? I don't know what you mean by merge, because it has been India, it is always India. So, yes, so if you ask me when will the occupation end, I think that's what you meant. So I actually find it very interesting. You know, till 370, when 370 was continuing, in our own country, actually there was not much discussion about POK. There was at one point in the 1990s, in fact, where some pressure was put on us by Western countries at that time. And then at that time, this was during Narasimha Rao's government, Parliament actually unanimously passed a resolution on POK. But after that, actually the debate in this country, and I would say in many ways the public interest in this country receded. But when we actually moved on 370 and finally put an end to what was a temporary provision of the Constitution, which should never have continued for that long, and which was actually in a way fueling the separatism and violence and terrorism. I think people across the country today actually have become aware of the, of our history, of the mistakes that were made in the past. In fact, often I go a lot to universities. You know, people are very interested. They ask me, why did we go to UN on Kashmir? When I tell them, read the history, that, Sardar Patel had very deep reservations, but it was something that Nehru personally pushed at that time. And in fact, one of Sardar Patel's warnings on this was, because again, I come to the West in a way, he said, don't subject your interest to the judgment of other people who may have their own interest in this matter. And the West had an interest. We were going to them like a judge. The judge was party to the whole dispute. So this today, I think, is to me, a very interesting awareness in this country, an interest in this country. And usually, when once a country becomes aware and interest, then things happen. So you have to wait and watch. Now, the whole issue of, I think, demographic change issue. Look, we are a country, we need today, if we are talking of good governance, if we are talking of being a modern state, the basic obligation of the state is to protect its borders. Leaving your borders unguarded, open for people to come, this is not democracy and freedom. It is, at the very least, incompetence, probably vote bank. That, we are today, we've allowed things to happen in this country whose consequences are really serious. And when we actually today try to rectify it through good governance, I mean, to me, as a country, I am entitled to fence my border. It is my right to decide who will come into my country and not my people from my neighbors. They cannot choose, and it's certainly not their right to decide to come into my country. And we actually mix it up with as though we are putting some unreasonable restriction. And, stopping a foreigner coming into the country is not discrimination. It is actually a basic obligation to your own people. Each one of you will do it for your own house. I mean, would you allow your house to be entered by a stranger and give a few rooms of your house to someone you don't know? You will never do that. And yet you expect, I mean, you don't expect, but some people expect the country to do that. So I think today we need, 370 is one example today, protecting our borders is one. There are a whole lot of issues where we need to correct the mistakes of the past. And one of the ways of progressing is to be honest about it, to debate it, to look at because every country will make mistakes. I mean, nobody is perfect. But a smart country will correct those mistakes. And in different ways, that is what we are trying to do. On this Russia, US, see, look, they have their arguments and but I am very confident of one thing in this country. I think people of this country are confident, they are assured, they are sensible. Our electoral system is very robust. Our electoral commission today is very strong. I don't really accept that others will be able to influence the outcome of this. I think people will try. They will try. But I'm very confident that they will not succeed. And the last question on the UN Security Council. Again, that also there is a history. I mean, I don't want to go into it, then it sounds like I'm complaining too much. But I do want to say this, that for many years, what is a general feeling in the world is being blocked by a few countries. And what they are doing is, they're not allowing it to actually come up. Sometimes case ko up, you don't allow it to come to court. So that is one way of dealing with a problem. So they're not allowing this issue actually to be debated with a record, see what happens normally if something important is being debated, there's normally a draft, people make amendments, then there's a discussion, there's a vote. All that has been delayed or blocked for many, many years. But I do sense today that there is a change in the world, that there is a very powerful sentiment for change. I think when people today look, they look at what is happening in West Asia, Middle East, what is happening in Ukraine, they see that big, we speak about a global organization. The most populous country is not there. There's no African country. There's no Latin American country. The UN was invented when there were roughly 50 independent countries. The original membership of UN was about 50. Today it is almost 200. So imagine, any organization or enterprise or a company, if the shareholders had gone up by 4 times, 3 times, would the organization not change? And yet, that is this. So I feel the pressure will mount. I'm very confident. I can see some signs of it already. So I think it's something I'm very hopeful.
One last.
So much. Dr. Jaishankar sir, I would like to approach, the question that pertains to the elephant in the room. We are sitting here in Kolkata, and there have been a number of discourses about the situation across the border on the western side. Whereas we are here on the eastern border, and we are ongoingly facing a marked demographic change, which I think Dr. Dipankar was also, pointing to. It has come to us through, various propaganda that maybe the center is scared of approaching the condition that lies on in this eastern state, for the simple reason that the situation here might be even more complicated than the one in Jammu and Kashmir. Any comments on that?
Okay, one last.
It was wonderful listening to you, Dr. Jaishankar. I'm a proponent of corporate governance and good governance. And in this context, the 2013 Companies Act put as a duty of a director that they must work in the interest of the company. Now, when people get to the helm of affairs of the country, whichever side of the table they are sitting on, isn't it a duty to uphold the interest of the country and not denigrate the country? Can we do something about it?
A very quick one, sir.
Duty of the country and not, what is it? Not
And denigrate the country.
A very last.
India entered into a deal with Iran to develop a port there, and following that, they've almost threatened that India should be ready to face consequences. Your comment on that? Thank you.
So let me respond to the first question. I don't think it's the elephant in the room. Look, the situations are very dissimilar. I would not compare what had happened for many, many decades in Jammu and Kashmir with the challenges which this part of India and the challenges which we face on the eastern border. But I would say this: if you look at the record of the Modi government, you can say many things about it, but you cannot accuse it of being scared. You know, I think we do say one thing. You know, even in a manifesto, this time in the manifesto we have said some things. We really mean what we say. We give a lot of thought to what we put, what we promise. It is not something that is casually done. And I would, in a way, answer your question by saying that when it comes to the security of the country, when it comes, as I said, you know, this is not just my personal belief. I mean, all of us in the government believe today that protecting our external boundaries is a basic duty of that country. And today, good governance has many implications. I mean, and good governance also includes knowing who your citizens are. So I think these are responsibilities of a country, and I think I'm very confident that Modi Sarkar will do its duty in regard to all of this. Yes, I'm not entirely sure I follow your point, but I totally agree with you. I mean, to me, anybody who's in government should not denigrate the country, should not denigrate the government. It is in a way, a responsibility, or I would even say a privilege that the person who's in that position has been given. So I really see, I cannot be of a different opinion than to say that nobody should really badmouth the country at home or abroad. And one of the things which trouble me sometimes is, we have our politics and differences and, discussions inside the country. But when I do occasionally see people go out and say in this country things are breaking down, democracy is in danger, institutions are falling apart, and actually almost say, why don't you come and, help us fix it? These things trouble me, because I do, there are some things which, like you would do in a family, some things stay at home and some things maybe are more legitimately discussed outside. I think it's important to be respectful of that. And the last question, the Iran issue, we've had a long association with the Chabahar port, but this was, we could never sign a long-term agreement, and the reason was there were various problems in the Iranian end, who was our partner, JV, it's a JV. So, joint venture, the partner changed, conditions changed. So, finally, we were able to sort this out, and we were able to actually get the long-term agreement done. And the long-term agreement is necessary, because without it, you cannot really improve the port operations. And the port operations, we believe, will benefit the entire region. So, I did see some remarks which were made, but I think it's a question of, communicating and convincing and, getting people to understand that this is actually for everybody's benefit. I don't think people should take a narrow view of it, and they have not done so in the past. So if you look at even US's own attitude to Chabahar in the past, the US has been appreciative of the fact that Chabahar has a larger relevance. So, we will work at it.